Welcome to Kingdom Reps. This is my testimony series. Today we have Justus Daniels, my cousin, and tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, as he said, my name is Justus Daniels. Me and Dalton are cousins. We've known each other our whole lives. When it comes to church within ministry, I have been on our praise team for over a decade. I also am in youth work. I am a youth worker. I've only been in the youth for about 3 years, but I've helped prior, but I haven't been fully in the ministry, but for about 3 years. I am our lead drummer. And then I also am on our creative team, which basically is videography, social media, things like that. And then I also started helping out in the sound booth. So,
Jack of all trades.
yes, sir.
So, which one of these do you think has had the biggest impact on you?
Um, I mean, I think each individual ministry has impacted me in a different way, significantly. But I think the two would be obviously youth work and being on the praise team, for different reasons. So for me, I've drummed for over a decade on our praise team. And that is a pretty long time. And I can say the way that it impacted me is, one, it showed me how to worship. It taught me how to worship. And also, it kind of grounded me within church, because as you're growing up and you're figuring things out for yourself, I was raised in church, which I'm very thankful for. But as you grow older, you can't just blindly follow what you were taught as a child. You got to figure out things for yourself. And I know for me, being in that ministry for as long as I was, and especially there's a point in that ministry where I was the only drummer at our church for, I want to say probably about 5 years straight of being the only drummer in the church. So it did put a lot of pressure on me, but I know that that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because it kept me grounded in church during those years that it would have been easy for me to fall away from church.
So, what would you say to someone? There's a lot of ministries in church, and I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes here, but someone that's doing something, they've been doing it for several years now. What would you say to them as far as, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, but it's important?
Right. Like it's well, I can say, and I'm going to say this, obviously, being transparent, there are moments where you will get burned out. I think that happens to everybody at least once in a ministry if they've been in it long enough. And for me personally, I had made it a priority in my life, even on the times that I didn't want to do it, because I knew that everybody else on that team relied on me. And so I think it involves a lot of selflessness. And I know personally for me, I've dealt with pride a lot. I think honestly, that's a big thing people deal with in platform ministry specifically. But I would just say that, stay encouraged. I definitely think talking to either your pastor or your praise team leader, talk to them about it. Don't keep that in, because that can slowly become bitterness and things like that if you neglect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in a position where you are kind of forced to be in it and maybe you don't want to be in it, that is a hard position to be in, because that can be a lot of responsibility. especially when you feel like you're not getting any time off. But I would definitely recommend going to your leaders in your church and talking to them about it, because they can encourage you. Because I know that my youth leader and my pastor, I'm sure there were moments in their lives where they did not want to do what they were doing, but they had to out of responsibility. And so, I think the biggest thing is just kind of try to look at the whole of things and not just your personal look. Look at other people in other ministries and, how they were basically, they had to fulfill that position. And just think about the people around you, because it doesn't only affect you in the end, it affects everybody on that team. So
teamwork. I like that. Speaking of all the youth and all of that, something I noticed as far as not really social media, but it's interaction wise. I like how y'all connect with people, specifically at y'all's church and y'all's team. So, and this is a very broad question: how do we reach young people?
Oof. Well, I think first off, it starts with the young people that are already in your church. Because I think young people have the highest potential to reach more young people, whereas adults and older people, it's just hard for us to connect with the younger generation, right? They have it's a totally different generation. And so I think one, really diving deep with the youth that you already have, in, their belief in them being involved, I think is a very big deal. Pushing things like P7 clubs, talking about explaining and teaching our young people in the church, how to approach other young people, in their schools and stuff, with the Christian mentality without feeling, obviously we want our young people to be strong and courageous. That's what God tells us, to be strong and courageous. He commands it. In Joshua 1:9.
Nice.
As a verse on there. Yes, sir. And then the other thing I think as well with reaching young people is, I think, facilitating events outside of church with other Christian and godly people and godly young people. Because if you, at least from my personal experience, I know inviting somebody to Sunday church, there's a much higher chance that they're going to deny that. But if I invite them to come hang out at bowling with me and some of my friends from the church, they're much more willing to go. And then they can get connected with our community. And as they become closer and become friends and you talk, that can lead to them coming to church. And I think that also goes the same way with the young people. We obviously, I know that your church, don't y'all do weekly like youth events, or not necessarily events, but just y'all have youth hangouts and stuff?
Every week.
Every week.
Yep.
So I think telling your youth to invite their friends to those events. And, I'm thinking of one of my young people. His name is Michael Johnson. He's awesome. One of his friends was completely atheist. And he told him, hey, me and some of my friends are going to play, I don't know if it was basketball or it was some sport, but that's all he said. He didn't say anything about church or anything, or it was main event. He said, hey, me and some of my friends are going to main event to hang out. Do you want to come? And he was like, yeah, sure. Why not? So he drove him and they met at the church, and he was like, why are we at the church? And he said, oh, it's a youth event and we're going to main event. And now, he's still working on him, but he no longer is atheist. Slowly after that, he started to come to church. He even went to the altar a few times. And he was full blown atheist. And it all started with Michael inviting him to a main event.
The main event. That's how you do it right there. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we've kind of gone away from all the well, not completely, but more traditional. I don't want to say old ways because you know what I mean, but
Right.
focusing more on that connection, that authentic connection, not just saying, "Hey, come to
Right.
this event." I wanted to go back on when you're talking about young people, how we focus on the ones that are already there. I think that speaks volumes right there. Um, Reinvesting in what we do have. Um, Speaking of reaching out to people, not specifically young people, but just in general, what have you noticed across the board, not just your church or my church,
Right.
how we're connecting with new converts? What's working, in your opinion?
From what I have seen, which obviously, take it with a grain of salt. I'm sure my field of view of things going on is narrow in the grand scheme of things. But I would say kind of the same with the youth, but I believe that it starts with a strong connection outside of the church, building friendships. Um,
So, what does that take
I,
for us?
man,
So we
well,
can't stay in the
I
church,
mean,
right? Or not, you know what I mean by that. So we can't just twiddle our
indulge me.
thumbs and
Yeah,
stay inside. And hopefully,
exactly.
they come to us. We got to go to them.
Exactly. And and the biggest places that you can do that, and it is at your job, is that if you're in college. I think those two are some large places that a lot of people, including myself, I'm not exempt from this. I
Yeah.
do the exact same thing, but you get in your comfort zone and a routine, especially with your job or college, where you go in, you do your work, you work with your coworkers, and then
Mm.
you go back home and that's it. But those situations are the best times to have those type of conversations and to, you know, one thing I've been trying to do more with myself is if I know I'm going to an event or there's something special happening at our church, I try to mention it or talk about it to my coworkers. Now, I work construction, so all my coworkers are 40 plus years old. So it's obviously
Hey, want to go to main
different,
event?
right? It's a little different, but I definitely think that the biggest thing that we can do to bring more people to the church is to obviously share the goodness that we know about God, but the other is love people. I mean, just genuinely, unconditionally love people the way God loves his church and
Mm.
everybody. And, you know, in the Bible, when Jesus was walking on earth, he loved everybody and he was a servant. And I think when you apply those things in your whole life, in work, wherever you are, people automatically see something different in you. And that can open an opportunity to bring somebody to your church, whether you talk to them or not. But I definitely think it has to do with loving people and creating a connection outside of church that will eventually bring them to church.
Nice. That's good. A lot to unpack from that. As far as reaching people, what are specific ways that you personally connect with others that is kind of your thing that we could apply to our own circles and our own communities?
Well, I think one thing I tried to do is I always try to be kind and patient with people. And
Easier
this is
said than
something
done.
I'm still working on. Um, is just, in situations where people may get very frustrated or angry, I try to take a step back and look at it with patience and kindness, where other people would get angry. I I try my best to love people as best as I can, and I have to pray that every single day, because that's there are situations, somebody cuts you off on the road, and then all of a sudden, but I think that, and then for me personally, obviously I like to have fun with my coworkers, and we obviously, in construction, we're like always like making fun of each other, and all of that kind of stuff. But I've been trying to, like, so recently I say recently, a few years we've been doing what's called connect groups, and basically our church, for a season, normally between 2 to 3 months, we have a bunch of groups of different people just doing different things, fun things. It could be Bible study, it could just be bowling, but it's where we meet outside of church and have fun and connect with each other. And so I have been kind of mentioning that, or talking about the connect groups that I'm in with my coworkers.
Awesome.
And so, and I'm still working on it, so I'm not perfect, but that's, I think, I hate re-saying it, but I think for me personally, the biggest thing that people can really do is just to love people. And, not a worldly love, but a Jesus kind of love. And hopefully, they see Jesus through your actions and your words. They see something different in you, and that can draw people. I know my personal foreman, he asks me questions all the time about church. He hasn't come yet or visited yet. But slowly, as we've been working together more and more, he's slowly started asking me more and more questions about things like that, and I think just if I try to embody being like Jesus, he sees that. So I hope.
It's the ultimate example
Mm-hmm.
to follow. My next question is, we're slowly getting into the deeper things here. we're in the shallows right now. We're kind of in there. What is the point of struggle?
So you're asking, what is the point of struggle?
What's the point of it? Why do we struggle?
The point of it? Well, I think there's many reasons why people struggle. I think there's multiple reasons. From my personal experience, I can think of a few points of why I struggled. One was me following my flesh versus following God. If you're not following God and you're following your flesh, you're probably going to be struggling most of the time. It's difficult not to struggle when you're not within God's will. And I have made a whole lot of mistakes and struggled a whole lot because of my own stupid decisions. And so, but if we're talking about the point of that struggle, even though I did make those decisions and I did make those mistakes, I learned from them, and I didn't make the same mistake again. So I think if we're looking at it on that point from more of a surface level, I believe that, people don't learn if they never make a mistake. That is one of the number one ways that you can learn things, is by making mistakes. Or, if you're smart, learn from other people's mistakes. But not everybody, either gets that opportunity or is able to do that, right? The other thing, I think, if we're looking at it from a spiritual aspect, I know there have been a few points in my life where I have struggled with multiple things. And, through it, near the end of it, I could see God's hand in it. I knew that God brought me through that struggle for a reason, because the things that I learned through that struggle helped me to help somebody else that I knew personally not go through the same thing. And I feel like God knew that I would be able to get through it. And so he put me through it. And I came out better for it, and I was able to help somebody else out. And I think God does ordain certain people that ends up going through a whole lot of stuff. And, I'm sure in those situations, my situation, the thought, it comes to mind, you think, why am I going through this, God? Why am I going through this? But once you get through it and you see everything that you've learned and persevered through, not only are you stronger because you went through that, but you are stronger for the people around you. And again, you can help people not go through the same struggle that you did, because of whatever. And I'm extremely thankful for the struggle, because we talk about God molding and shaping you to the person that he wants you to be within his will and for his will. Well, sometimes molding and shaping has to start with a big old hammer, smashing it down flat to nothingness to reshape it to what it needs to be. And you can't get to that. I don't know if I want to say final position, but if you want to get to that promise or, that thing that God has for you, you got to go through all the rough stuff to be built up to that position. So
I feel like sometimes we make it harder than it needs to be. We need to be moldable.
Absolutely.
So along those lines of struggle, now we're diving in here.
Yeah.
What is one of the most difficult trials that you have overcome? We'll start with that.
Okay. Oof. Yeah. So, man, this is the biggest question I've thought of out of the ones that you've sent me. And there's two that I can think of. And, I didn't know which one I was going to talk about, and so I think, I'm going to talk about a relationship one, because I don't know if I've seen I don't know how many people talk about it, but within relationships. So I have been single for 5 years now, which I'm sure for some people that seems like a very long time.
Ladies, I was kidding.
No.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
No, but so when I was young, about 5 years ago, I was in a relationship, and I have zero ill will towards the person that I was dating, or about the situation. But in that relationship, it lasted a year. And there was a lot of manipulation and verbal abuse that happened in that relationship. And, in that relationship, that was difficult for me, because I was dating to marry, and I truly wanted to marry this person. And I truly loved them. Now, granted, first, I was immature and the other person was immature. We didn't know anything. And so I know for a fact that I jumped the gun too early in that relationship with love. I didn't know what true love was. But throughout that relationship, I do believe that I truly loved that person. But it was not a good relationship. It was very toxic. Again, it was full of manipulation and verbal abuse, and it wasn't good. And it took a year of that before I finally got myself out of that relationship. And, one, throughout that relationship, I learned a lot of, and I was not perfect in that either. I made plenty of mistakes as well. But through that trial that I went through being in that relationship, I learned a few things. One, I learned what real love is, which for me, the only way you can truly look at love is the way that God loves the church unconditionally. That is true love. It's not an emotion. It's not a feeling. The other thing is, when you get in relationships like that, I was talking to one of my elders. I call him an elder. If he ever watches this, he probably will be angry. He's not that old. But he's talking about, you get in these relationships and you have rose-colored glasses. And you can only see through your rose-colored glasses at this person, while everybody else who's not wearing rose-colored glasses can see the actual situation. But because you have the rose-colored glasses on, you don't see everything else that they're seeing. And so in that relationship, I had very close family members, very close friends that I trusted, who told me that I needed to be out of that relationship, that person was not good for me. And I ignored them. I defended that person and ignored them and did not listen to them or take their advice in that relationship. And all that did was cause that other person more pain, as well as me a whole lot more pain. And so if you are in a situation like that, where you're in a relationship and you do love that person, but it is full of toxicity, it is not godly, and there is, whatever is in that situation, one, I definitely think that you need to go to people that you trust, that will be honest with you. Close people. For me, it was my dad and my mom and my best friend. And ask them about that person and what they think, and listen to them, because they're not going to tell you it like how you see it. They're going to tell you it from a very objective standpoint, like it is. And because I went through that, now, if I talk or am interested in any girl, I immediately ask my mom, my dad, and my friends about them and what they think about them before anything, because they're going to be honest with me. Because I may be googly eyed and all up in the clouds because they're really pretty or something. But if they say, I notice this, I notice this, you need to take that very seriously, because that is going to affect the relationship for the rest of the time. So, and then the other thing I would say in that relationship that made it struggle is I did not have God first. That person was first in the relationship. And so we made a lot of mistakes and did a whole lot of things that we shouldn't have done. And I think as long as you are keeping God first in your relationship, and the other person is keeping God first in the relationship, that right there that is going to be a strong relationship. Yeah.
That's good. I think there's a lot of people right now, a lot of young people that are going head over heels, and there's always that pressure. Well, everyone else has a boyfriend, girlfriend. I gotta have one too. And like you said, you can end up doing some serious stuff if you're not actually committed, or not doing what you're supposed to be, not putting God first. I think it was Pastor, actually. We do the program Worth the Wait, and he compares it to a triangle, right? So you have God at the top, you and your significant other are here, and as you are getting closer to God, you're actually getting closer to each other. Which is,
I love that. That's so
always
awesome.
stuck with me. So in all of these things, you made it through. You got some scars, right? Finding humor when you're facing difficulty. I think we've all kind of done that, right?
Absolutely.
No, sometimes we have some pretty dark humor, but
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what would you say as far as finding humor in the trial? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, I think it does depend on the trial that you're going through. But for me, it's it's all how you, obviously it's all on how you look at the situation, right? But with me, so there's one thing that I like. Well, there's a phrase that I don't like, but I do like because it depends on how you use it. And it's the phrase, "It is what it is." And if something is within your control or power to do something about, then it is not an "is what it is" statement. If you say it is what it is and it is within your power or control to change that situation, then you should not be saying it is what it is, because it's not. But if it is a situation outside of your control and you have no control over that situation and you know that you can't do anything about that situation, it is what it is. Leave it alone and give it to God. And because I tell you what, I have a problem with overthinking tremendously about situations out of my control. And recently I've been really working on myself to take a look at it from an objective standpoint. Do I have any control over this situation? And do I not? And if it's completely out of my control, then it is what it is. It's in God's hands. And I let it go. I don't let it consume me. And so I know that's kind of away from humor, but I think that when you have that mentality, when you don't sit there and stew on things outside of your control, because, anxiety and fear is not of God. That is of the enemy. And sitting there and stewing on things like that creates anxiety, fear, and those type of things. And obviously you can't have humor or joy or peace or love when you're constantly feeling anxiety and fear over situations that you don't have any control over. So if you remove that, man, holy cow, it's like, man, the amount of times I've had situations where I like sit there and calm myself down. I'm like, okay, Justus, you can't do anything about the situation. It is in God's hands. Let God be God, and you do what you can do. And you know what I mean? And man, it's just like a weight lifts off of you. You don't got to worry about it. Things feel joy, and it's a lot easier to find humor in everything when you are not constantly putting that kind of pressure on yourself.
I think there's a scripture, sufficient is the day and the evil thereof. Basically, hey, today's problems are here. Let's worry about today's problems instead of yesterday's or tomorrow's, etc. No, that was good. I think that hit the nail on the head there. Just doing what you can do. I say that a lot at work.
Yeah.
Just complete chaos. It's like, what? Yeah, it is what it is, man. Whatever.
It is what it is. Exactly.
What you can do. Almost coming to a close here. This has been really good. What is, on a lighter note, what is a memorable story that still brings you joy today? Something that just kind of sticks out to you. I know there's a lot.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's a lot, and I can, So the thing that came up to me, most people, if I say this story, this kind of can connect with finding humor and struggle, because a lot of my memorable moments are painful moments. But when I look back at them now, it is hilarious or just like stupid, like, bro, what were you thinking? But is actually when I broke my arm, I broke my wrist in half.
Which time?
Which time, right? The first time. But we were on vacation at a state park, and I mean, I was like 12, and I was in gymnastics at the time, and I was pretty decent. I was on the team, so I was pretty prideful and pretty confident in myself.
Oh Lord.
And we're at the state park, and there's this big old wall, like with steps on each side. And it was probably about 6 feet tall. And, there's people walking all around. And in my little goofy self, I'm like, man, I'm going to do a backflip off that 6-foot rock wall. And everybody's going to see, and they're going to think I'm so cool. Like, that is like the thought process that I went through. So I got up there, and man, I'm ready. I don't know where my parents or my family are. I'm sitting here I have to do this, and I'm like looking around like, oh yeah, this is about to be epic. So I go for it, and bam, my leg caught the wall, and instead of doing a backflip, I just slapped the ground on my back like that. And I was sitting there for a second looking around, like, ugh, that's awkward. And then I looked over, and my arm was here, and my arm was down here. It was literally hanging on by skin. My hand was. And so I started screaming bloody murder. I was freaking out. And I'm running and I'm screaming and I'm trying to, Todd finds me and he's like, holy cow, and he takes me to my mom. And just for reference, my mom has been a Cook children's nurse for over 15 years. So when I run up there, I'm holding my dangling arm and I'm screaming bloody murder. She just looks at me with a complete calm face and goes, okay, sweetie, we're going to take you to the hospital. And that's it. And I'm thinking, woman, do you not see where my arm is? It is way over there. I'm like dangling. So anyways, we went to the hospital, and we got to the ER. There's 0 people in the ER somehow. Nobody was in the ER. So I immediately got rushed into the room. They gave me blood and all that. But I did not have to have surgery, which is crazy because literally my whole double wrist, everything was just broken in half. It was literally hanging by skin and things. I said this whole situation is obviously memorable. I could keep going. Like the way they fixed my arm, and I still remember it vividly, is the dude had a set of Chinese traps in this position with 5 for your fingers, right? Literally Chinese traps. And he put my arm in it, and I'm numbed out, but I'm totally awake. And he just used it, and he pulled my arm back down into the position it needed to be with 5 Chinese traps. And then my bones just grew back together. But I had 2 or 3 cast, and I got them signed at school. That was pretty.
So you ended up being cool after all.
I ended up being cool after all, and I learned a valuable lesson and more after that. I think God. I look back on it now. I was like, God was checking my pride real quick on that one.
Oh,
so, yeah,
that's hilarious. So to end all of this, all to struggle and working with people and connecting, what is one piece of advice that you would give to, I want to narrow it down to a young person today. Like, hey, young person, if you don't grab this and don't memorize this, you're not going to do well in life.
Oof. Obviously, I am 25, so I don't have a lot of life experience. There's still a lot of things that I am going to learn and need to learn, right? But I think that the thing that has helped me the most going from being a young person into adulthood is don't have a chip on your shoulder. Don't take things personally. In my career in construction, And also when I was on the fire department for a little while, those dudes, they are going to mess with you and give you all kinds of junk constantly.
Oh yeah.
All right. And if you have a chip on your shoulder and you take everything personally, your life is going to be miserable your whole life. So the best advice and it was actually my best friend Bannon who told me it after one point, because I had a little bit of insecurity and I was getting real frustrated, and they were messing with me, and man, I just got so angry, and I was just letting it build up in me, and I was getting angry at everything, and he just told me like, hey, listen, we love you, but you can't take all these things so personally, dude. He was like, bro, you're just like, what are you doing? And I had to take a step back and realize, yeah, what am I doing? I'm just making myself feel awful all the time and miserable because of those things. And so ever since then, people give me crap, I just brush it off. It is what it, you know what I mean? I don't take it personally. It is what it is. And I have fun and I move on. And if you have that kind of, you're going to be great in most places. But if you always have a chip on your shoulder and everything that people say, you take personally, your life is going to be miserable. So I would just say, don't take things personally.
All right. Don't take it personally. Well, thank you, sir. We made it through.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
He said we're going to have to do multiple takes. We did this on the first take. Fantastic.
Hey. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your input here, your testimonies. There's a lot more that I know personally we could talk about. Yeah, we might do a little part 2 maybe. Go deeper into the weeds on some of these.
Absolutely. Maybe
this was
down
good.
More in our personal relationship.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here.
Sir.
This is my testimony series. Justus Daniels, thank you for being here.
Yes, and guys, go to his YouTube and go to his Instagram and go to every single plug he's got and like the videos, comment and like. It helps it get around.
This is our biggest supporter right here.
Do that. So yes,
Brendan was telling me, he's like, man, Justus has been commenting on everything we do. Yeah, he's literally our biggest supporter. So appreciate it. I'm glad we got to do this today. This is our first. This is our second online, which makes it to where we can talk to way more people than normal.
Oh yeah, the possibilities are endless.
So this is awesome. Well, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Have a good one.